look at this, we'll call it a ship, the ship of the United States of America, and how do we get this thing back on track, going in the right direction again? And I believe that there is one fulcrum point that we could focus on, and now there's some data to actually, I believe, back up that, hey, here is an opportunity for us to actually get this thing, this train back on the track. So the Gallup poll said this from 1944 to 2011. So, I mean, that's a long time. 1944 to 2011, 90 plus percent of Americans believed in a God, some form of God they believed in. Now, from 2011 down to 2022, there's been this just precipitous drop from 90 plus percent whoosh, all the way down to 81%. That might not sound like much, 9, 10%. But we're talking about people that believe in God. Think about the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not kill. What's been happening in our nation as of late? Seems to be a lot more pervasive, happening a lot more often than potentially in the past when I believe God was much more a part of America. I know it's always happened. I understand that. I'm not naive. I'm just suggesting it seems to be much more evil, if you will, now than it was. Another important piece of the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not covet. I mean, Spencer, how many people do you know that go out there and got the old Instagram flex going, right? Like, I mean, you get on Instagram, that's all you do is covet, covet, covet.
Absolutely. All the time. Everything has to be compared. Everything has to be better. Everything you got to wish comparison. It's not only hurting, like you said, it's a commandment, but it's also strenuous on the mental. So it's a two-sided prong there.
And that's exactly what I believe. They said, hey, thou shalt not covet, because then you don't want to go through these mental health where you're always comparing. Just go be you. I believe the greatest superpower that you have, that I have, is be you, be me. Hey, you go be you, I'll go be me. We're good. But then obviously rejoice in who you are. So I bring all this up from the content that we've mentioned before. If you look at what's happened with these school shootings, one of the number one common themes amongst these young men that are going in there and doing these very evil shootings is that they had a broken family and predominantly no father in the home. Then we took it back to 1963 and we said, hey, what happened in 1963? Well, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled no Bible in the schools. We've seen this, I would say, precipitous drop in just sort of the moral well being, the moral fabric of our nation. I mean, when's the last time you saw a show on TV that's actually done well, like A Father Knows Best or Leave It to Beaver? Right. And you can go out and say, Chris, those shows were anti-feminist. And I understand that. The one thing that they did do very, very well, though, is they spoke about the value of the family. How many shows are there today that speak well of the value of the core family? I can't think of a lot. There might be a few of them, but there's not many that come to the top of my head. So I bring all this up because you may have seen the breaking news today where the Supreme Court is starting to generate restoration in our nation. The revelation is beginning to happen, and thus why I believe we are now about to experience this great awakening that many of you and I have been praying for now from quite some time. And the case was this, and I want to remind you, if you look at the First Amendment, it says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And so you had a football coach, all he wanted to do, look, he loved his guys, loved his team, and he's a Christian. So all he would do is he would go out somewhere on the field, oftentimes in the middle of the field, like we see many, many times, and he would go out and pray. Wasn't mandatory for his team, wasn't mandatory for them to come out to midfield and join him. He just did it. More and more young men started to follow him, and he thought it was great. Which, by the way, and if I had time today, I may share this with you, but there was a phenomenal story about the NDSU Bison football team. And when they were going through their challenges, they started to have more and more Christian athletes come on the team, go out there and pray. And you could talk to some of the players that were there before this happened and after this happened. And that was a turning point in that program. The timing it's not a coincidence. That was a turning point in the program. So anyways, this coach would go out and he would pray. It wasn't like it was over the loudspeaker, wasn't mandatory. Started doing this in 2008. Next thing you know, the school's like, I don't know. This guy's out there showing faith. So they basically fired him. basically fired a coach for simply walking out to midfield and exercising his First Amendment right to simply say a prayer. Let me remind you, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Now, the opposite side is going to say this to you. Oh, but wait, separation of church and state. Do you remember the decision last week, Roe v. Wade, and what the big main talking point of the justices was in the opinion that overturned Roe v. Wade? Abortion's not in the Constitution. Abortion's never mentioned in the Constitution. Thus, how does somebody have a constitutional right to an abortion? That was a big part of the premise of the opinion. Guess what else is not in the Constitution that many people have been dubbed to believe that it is because of prior decisions back in like 1947? Many people, if you walked up to them and just said, hey, let me ask you a question. And in fact, have some fun today with family and friends and just walk up to them and go, let me ask you, is separation of church and state in the Constitution? And I bet you a large percent of the people you ask, if you go, I'm just curious, is separation of church and state in the U.S. Constitution? They're going to be like, yeah, absolutely. No, 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 no. Nowhere in the U.S. Constitution does it mention the separation of church and state. That actually came from a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to the Danbury Church of Connecticut or something like Danbury Baptist Church of Connecticut. That is where that theme comes from, but it's nowhere in the Constitution. And yet, I think it was in 1947, the Supreme Court actually brought that letter of Thomas Jefferson and used that as part of an opinion as to why there should be, quote unquote, separation of church and state, thus less prayer within the schools. How's that working out for us? Less prayer in the schools. Not working out too well. So this is a major, major decision that now is hopefully going to free up many Christians because it says in our word, hey, go out and be bold as a lion. Some people have got that skill set. They're able to do that. Some, they're working on it. Let's put it that way. They're working on it. And now what I'm hoping for, and I even had people over the weekend tell me that this Roe v. Wade decision is going to do this. It's going to embolden more and more people now to walk out and to show and share their faith and be bold as a lion. And I say this with such importance, with such passion and love around it, because again, in my opinion, and the data is beginning to show this, if there's one area of our nation that we could use as the ultimate fulcrum to go, hey, is the train on the right tracks or the wrong tracks? Just look at the Gallup poll and it shows there's been a 10% drop of a belief in God in the United States of America in the last 10, 11 years. That is a huge, huge drop. So if we can restore that belief in God and walk that out in practice, where you and I can walk out in the 9 fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, kindness, gentleness, self-temperance, patience. I think I tweeted out today, be the change you want to see in the world. So if you want more anger in the world, if you want more division, then hey, go be that. Not what I'm suggesting you do, but if that's what you want, that's your prerogative. I think all of us are tired of that. It doesn't work. It's not effective. You start screaming at people, their ears shut off, their heart shuts down, their brain shuts down. What is effective is when you can walk the walk, and nobody's perfect, right? All I'm saying is do the best we can. And then go out and share that because of the way you walk, the words that you use. You never know. You may touch somebody's heart, turn them, and we are starting now to get this train back on the tracks. Another decision that happened last week that's a big, big decision because we've talked a lot about here in North Dakota. If we're going to make North Dakota the freest state in the nation, many people say to me, what's critically important is the fact that we create school choice. Last week, the Supreme Court ruled that in Maine, because a lot of people across the nation now are using what's called a voucher system. So it's where the money follows the student, which I think is fantastic. So let's say that the state gave you a voucher for $2,000 or whatever it is. I'm making up numbers, but they gave you $2,000 for your kid's education. You can now take that $2,000, and if you wanted to go to Shanley or a public school or Oak Grove or another private school, you have now, according to the Supreme Court, have the liberty to do that. What many people on the other side are saying is, hey, we're now using state dollars. It's so funny to me. It's so funny to me how people say, hey, we're using state dollars. They always seem to forget that it's your money, right? Like, wait a second here. Like, that didn't just magically, well, I guess if it's the Federal Reserve, it does, but it doesn't typically just magically appear in the state's coffers, right? Like, they're getting it from you. It's your money. But then they want to debit state money going to religious organizations or religious schools. So that is why I believe here in North Dakota, it is critically important as we begin to make North Dakota the freest place on the planet. Think about that for a moment. North Dakota, the freest place on the planet. Do you need any better marketing than that? I mean, that is the market. You want to get people here for workforce? That's the brand. North Dakota, the freest place on the planet. Come join us and celebrate freedom, celebrate liberty, celebrate sovereignty. Man, somebody pay me for that, will you? I need to get paid, Spencer. All right, when we come back, we're going to talk about something that I believe no one else is talking about in regards to